truth, I cannot recall the first time that I noticed the change in my daughter's behavior. She was always developing, altering, or so it seemed with every passing day. Sam, my son, is gentle and quiet and likes to stay close to me. But Louisa is a more independent spirit, inquisitive and testing of the constraints placed upon her. And as she approaches adolescence, those aspects of her personality have become more and more pronounced. And so it may have been that she had already become something different, even before I moved to the country and the events that followed. It appeared that the rectory had been on the market for some time. It had never provided a good living, and the care of the village's flock now lay with clerics from the larger town of Gravington, who took it in turns to hear services in the old chapel. 4 acres of good land surrounded the rectory, but none of the locals appeared anxious to pursue grazing rights upon it for their cattle. The reason for their reluctance could be traced to a mound in the centre of one of the fields. It was perhaps 20 feet in circumference and a little over 6 feet in height. Its origins were unclear. Some in the village referred to it as a fairy fort, a former dwelling place of some older, mythical race. Although it went unmentioned as such in archaeological records of the area, Louisa liked the idea of having a fairy castle on our land, and so she chose to regard it as such. Frankly, I was happy to do the same, little people being infinitely less troubling to my slumbers than the possibility of large numbers of old bones slowly decaying beneath green grass and daisies. Perhaps it may be that I'd forgotten the stories I was told as a child, tales in which such beings were not kind and gentle and beautiful, but vicious and ugly and hungry for human life. There were words of warning spoken about them: child-stealers, cuckoos in the nest, changelings. Sam, by contrast, avoided the mound, preferring that we take the circuitous path through adjoining fields rather than pass by it, while his more adventurous sister took the direct route, frequently choosing to wave at us from her perch upon its topmost point as we passed. Sam was always a little in awe of his sister and her mercurial qualities. Once again, perhaps that was why I failed to notice the changes in her at first, for they took place against a constantly shifting backdrop of moods and humours. Yet, now that I consider the matter more closely, I do recall an incident some weeks after we arrived. I woke to feel a cool breeze flowing through the house, accompanied by the sound of a window beating against its frame. I left my bed and followed the sound to my daughter's bedroom. She was standing at the window. "I thought I heard someone calling," she said. But I noticed that she appeared to be concealing something from my view as she climbed back into bed. She drifted back to sleep almost immediately, as though she were wearied by her efforts, her hands hidden beneath the blankets. There was a leaf caught in her hair, perhaps blown in through the window, and I removed it gently, brushing the rest of her hair away from her brow so that it would not tickle her in her sleep. As I did so, my fingers touched something rough close by her shoulder. Gingerly, I drew back the blanket. Her doll, Molly, was gone. In its place was a rough form made of straw and twigs. 4 dandelion leaves met upon its back in a crude imitation of wings, and it had slitted ovals for eyes. It resembled a person, except that its arms were unusually long and its torso was distended, the belly enormous. I carried the primitive form from my daughter's room and placed it on a shelf in the kitchen before returning to bed. When I returned to check upon it the next morning, it had fallen to pieces, and black flies clustered upon its scattered remains. It was almost midday when I at last had a chance to talk to Louisa about the incident of the night before, but she could recall nothing of our conversation. Nor could she tell me where her doll had gone, or how the straw figure came to be in Molly's place. I left her scouring the house for her lost doll under the care of our housekeeper, Mrs. Amworth, and decided to take a walk, until at last I found myself, not entirely without design, staring at the mound in the third field. I squatted silently at its base and laid my hand upon it, the earth warm beneath my palm. I was experiencing no unease now. In fact, I found myself relaxing, my eyes closing, the scent of wild flowers and running water filling my nostrils. I wanted to rest, to lie upon the ground and forget my worries, to feel the grass against my skin. I think that I almost began to stretch myself upon it, when an image came unbidden to me. I both saw and felt a presence approaching fast from beneath the mound, ascending along a tunnel of earth and roots, segmenting worms and crushing insects as it came. I glimpsed white skin, as of a creature that had spent too much time away from the light, and ears that were little more than flaps over sunken holes in its skull, and pale lips and dark, slitted eyes, animated by an intelligence that was both ancient and terrible. And it was not alone. Others followed it, ascending toward where I knelt, drawn by my warmth and driven by a desire that I could not comprehend. My eyes snapped open, my mind emerging from its torpor, and I snatched my hand away and threw myself from the mound. But for a brief moment I felt a disturbance beneath my palm, as though some force had thrust against the skin of the earth in order to grasp me to itself. I rose to my feet and wiped the grass and dirt from my hands. Where my palm had rested only moments before, I now glimpsed a patch of red. Warily I stabbed at it with a twig. It tumbled down the slope of the mound and came to rest at my feet. It was the head of Molly, my daughter's doll, and it was only when the first drops of rain began to strike my face that I found the strength to pick it up and take it home. That night, a great storm arose, and all the windows and doors in the house rattled and shook. I awoke to the sound of Sam crying and brought him to my bed. I checked on Louisa, but she remained asleep, oblivious to the turmoil without. And next morning, in the village, no one could recall even the slightest breeze arising during the preceding night. Days went by, and the summer sun grew warmer and warmer. We slept with the thinnest of sheets to cover us, and tossed and turned until tiredness overcame our discomfort and at last brought us rest. On one or two of the hottest nights, I awoke to the sound of a tapping at the glass in the room next door, and found Louisa standing somewhere between sleeping and waking, scraping at the lock. In the morning she would have no memory of what might have caused her to rise, but marks began to appear on the outside of the glass, faint, parallel scratches, as though the tines of a large fork had been dragged roughly against it, and my dreams were haunted by shadows of flying beings, their wings now free once more to beat against the darkness as they tested windows and doors, frantically trying to gain access to the children within. Then one day I was called to London on business and was forced to spend the night away from the house. Despite my repeated warnings to her that all the windows and doors should remain securely locked at night, Mrs. Amworth, who had agreed to stay with the children, left the window in Louisa's bedroom slightly ajar, so that air might flow through her room and bring her some comfort. And the presence in the fort grasped the opportunity that it had been seeking, and all was altered forever. It was Sam who first alerted me to the change in his sister. Previously adoring of her, he now kept himself apart from her, refusing to join in her games and remaining even closer to me than before. One night, after I had laid him down to sleep, I heard movement in his room, and, upon attempting to enter, found my progress impeded by a chair and cushions and Sam's toy box. When I asked him what he was doing, he at first refused to speak, instead pushing his lower lip out and looking at his feet. But slowly that lip began to tremble, and in the midst of a flood of tears he told me that he was frightened. "Frightened of what?" I asked. "Louisa," he replied. "But why? She's your sister, Sam. Louisa loves you. She wouldn't do anything to hurt you. She asks me to go outside and play with her," said Sam. "You like playing with her," I said, conscious suddenly that while this might once have been true, it was true no longer. "At night," said Sam. "She wants me to go out and play with her at night, in the dark. At the fort," he added. And then his voice broke altogether, and he would not be consoled. But when I confronted Louisa about her brother's fears, she would answer only that he was lying, and that she had no desire to play with him anyway. When I tried to pursue the matter, she would not reply, and I eventually gave up, frustrated and uneasy. In the days that followed, I watched Louisa, noticing now a stillness about her, a wariness. She spoke less and less and appeared to be losing her appetite. One day I found her examining the metal screen that kept Sam from opening his window until he was older, testing the lock with her fingernail. For the first time I lost my temper with her, demanding to know what she thought she was doing. She did not answer, and tried to slip by me, but I caught her by the shoulders and shook her hard, demanding a reply. I almost struck her. So furious was I at the change in her behavior, until I looked into her eyes and saw something red flicker in their depths, like a torch suddenly igniting in the darkness of a deep chasm. And it seemed to me, although perhaps I merely imagined it, that her eyes were narrower than before, and now slanted upward slightly at the corners. "Don't touch me," she whispered, and there was a hoarse, filthy aspect to her voice. "Don't you ever touch me again, or you'll be sorry." And with that, she wrenched herself from my grasp and ran from the room. Now I have caught up with myself, and the details are almost entirely known. Night after night, Louisa comes to me through the darkness, a strange cast to her eyes as she says, "I am your new daughter." And I believe her. Close by me, Sam sleeps. I keep him with me every night, even as he asks why I will no longer let him sleep in his own room like a big boy. Sometimes I wake him with my dreams, dreams in which my daughter lies buried beneath a mound of earth, alive yet not alive, surrounded by pale things that have taken her and now keep her close to them, both curious and hateful of her, her cries smothered by the dirt. I have tried digging for her, but I hit stone within inches. Whatever lies under the mound has secured itself well. "Go away," I whisper to the being by my bed. The lights in her eyes flicker briefly as she blinks. "You can't keep him safe forever," the new daughter says. "Some night you'll fall asleep with a window open or a door ajar. Some night you'll be careless, and then you'll have a new son, and I will have a new brother." I grasp the bundle of keys tightly in my fist. They hang from my neck, secured by a chain, and they never leave my sight. Only at night are we at risk. Only when the sun has departed do they come, testing the security of our home. I have already put it up for sale, and soon we will leave. Time is pressing, for them and for us. "No, you're wrong," I tell her, and I watch as she retreats into a corner and sinks slowly to the floor, her eyes shining in the darkness as unseen figures pull at the windows and the doors, and my son, my real son, sleeps softly beside me, safe for now.